Hi, welcome to Dyspraxic Rosie Writes, a channel where we talk about dyspraxia, chronic illness, and the writing life. Today we're going to dive straight into my media archives in order to go into the nuances, challenges, and accomplishments in recent years of disabled writer representation and traditional publishing. Some of it will go into my own process of how I got my first book published. The second book was through a publisher happening to read my first book. So for those of you who are just starting their publishing journey, that may not be so helpful. So that is primarily what we're going to focus on in this video.
Rosemary, if you could start with this one.
Yeah, I queried over 90 different publishers and agents when I was first in the querying trenches, so to speak. And the thing that narrowed it down in terms of who was a terrible fit versus who was great is I queried at a time where people really trying diversity and inclusion angle, which is fantastic, don't get me wrong, but the thing is I felt at times people had the wrong intentions with that. They were looking for, there was some, unfortunately, looking at that too tokenistic. So for me, what helped narrow it down once I actually had to choose from was basically who was actually informed on neurodiversity, who had experience working with diverse writers, and who wasn't in it just because they wanted to look good.
Oh, yes, loads. I mean, I'm always very honest about this because I'm traditionally published with my book I mentioned, and it took 90 different queries. Each one of them was like a whole bunch of agencies and publishing houses from across the entire English-speaking world, basically. And it was a period of about a year and a half of a lot of people telling me over and over again that my story wasn't mainstream enough, that it wasn't going to be relevant enough to audiences. And right at the point where I thought I was going to give up, I heard from a wonderful editor by the name of Amy Lancaster Owen, who does all the neurodiversity stuff at Jessica Kingsley Publishers. And I had, on a whim, done a tweet where I explained what my book was about and what I want to do with it. And she said, hey, let's talk about this, send me a long pitch and some passages. And I waited an entire year, continued to pitch around. And then she finally said yes. And it came down to her and one other neurodiversity publisher.
In response to my comment about the fact that sometimes publishing professionals will make the assumption that disability writing is not, quote unquote, compelling enough for mainstream audiences, Alice Noodle wrote about exactly why that is and said that a survey published in Publishers Weekly showed that 89% of publishing professionals are non-disabled, something that is bound to impact the experiences of disabled authors. As with other kinds of marginalization, the presence of disability in disabled authors can only go so far in ensuring that disability is represented accurately and fairly in literature. If very few publishing professionals have comparable experiences, then there can be an impact not only on the accuracy of how disability is portrayed in books, but also in the experiences of the authors working at these publishers.
I'm sorry, what?
Inspiration porn was first coined by Australian disability activist Stella Young and intertwines sentimentality and pity into an uplifting message of disability aimed at a non-disabled audience to make non-disabled people feel better about themselves. In an interview I did for a publication called Blot, I elaborated on exactly what can be done to improve upon this situation of not enough representation in particular. I talked about something called inspiration porn, which is the byproduct of a lack of disabled input. And I said that books too often go back to this inspiration porn angle, and that's a mindset in the market on what a disabled perspective looks like, and there really isn't enough dialogue or education about that. This leads to a bias about what people think will sell, and that's a big part of the problem. If there's more openness, then more of a three-dimensionalness will inevitably happen. But I don't want you to despair, despite everything you just heard. Slowly things are getting better, and more on that in a minute. Jessica Kingsley Publishers, who published my first book, is described in NYC Daily Post article as a trailblazer in the area of promoting neurominority acceptance. So in other words, acceptance of people with neurological conditions. And they describe it as a publishing house founded in 1987, which has been a home for writers who explore the infinite variety of neurological conditions. So that includes everything from dyspraxia, dyslexia, autism, and neurodiversity, as well as books on sensory processing and nonverbal learning disabilities. Although a lot of other publishers are making major innovations in this area too. And some examples include a small press called Milkweed Editions, and also that includes Lived Places Publishing, who I had the honor of doing an event with one of their authors, who also published a book on dyspraxia. Although I am very, very, very quickly seeing that a number of other major traditional publishing houses as well are starting to consider the enormous potential of tapping into this lived experience market. Approximately 15 to 20% of the global population is neurodivergent, and approximately 16% of the global population is disabled. So no, this matter of are disabled voices mainstream enough is not exactly truthful. In fact, there is definitely a market out there of readers who have had experiences quite similar to yours. So no, the barrier is other people, not you. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed that video, like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Happy reading, happy writing, my friends.